and welcome to this episode of Dynamic CISO Talk Show. I'm Rahul Neelmani, editor of Dynamic CISO and Vice President, Community Engagement and Editorial at ISMG. Today, we have with us Zur Ulianitzky, Head of Security Research at XM Cyber. Zur is an experienced information security researcher and have spent almost a decade working in cybersecurity industry. He has a bachelor's degree in computer science engineering from Afeka Tel Aviv Academic College of Engineering. Now, what does XM Cyber do? Well, the company brings an innovative approach to proactively prevent cyber attacks by modeling how an attacker propagates the network. By discovering critical attack paths across on-premise and multi-cloud networks, XM Cyber helps organizations cost-effectively close security gaps before systems are compromised. Now, that's a very copybook introduction of the company. Let's immediately dive in. Welcome to the talk show, Zur. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here with you today.
Exactly. Pleasure is all ours. So, Zur, to begin with, introduce yourself and tell us in a nutshell about XM Cyber.
So, hi again. As you said, my name is Zur Ulianitzky. I'm working as the head of research at XM for almost 3 years, I think, now. And XM Cyber, as you said, is an attack management platform with the purpose of helping organizations securing the most critical security gaps they have in their environments toward critical assets. It combines different things that usually goes in silos into one system altogether, which brings the on-prem environment and the different issues in the on-prem environment, such as misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, user behavior, and so on, and cloud environments and all the relevant attack surface in the cloud itself, all together in one system.
Excellent. That was a brief but convincing introduction about yourself and the organization. So, Zur, let me begin with a few generic questions before we get into the specifics. So, how important or critical it is for cybersecurity organizations, the CISOs, the security teams, to know about the attack path management? What do we mean by attack path management? How does it work?
Sure. So if you take a typical organization today, the CISO team has different environment you need to manage. Cloud environment, some on-premise infrastructure, other services that are managed on different cloud providers and so on. And the most important thing is that they need to secure all of them together, but each one of them work in different silos. So they have a team of people that are responsible for the IT and the on-prem infrastructure. They have other teams that are responsible for the cloud environments. Sometimes all of those teams have their internal security issues, the ones that are relevant for the cloud, the ones that are relevant for the on-prem, and so on. The most important thing is that sometimes the IT person might think that a security issue isn't that important, but if you look at the bigger picture and take together the cloud environment and the on-prem environment together, you understand that by solving this not important issue with the eyes of the IT person towards a critical asset that is in your cloud. So what we bring to the table is the view of all of it together, and we're building and mapping different attack techniques toward our attack path management solution, which shows the CISO all the attack vector that combines all the different environment together, so he can decide what is the most crucial security issue that he wants to fix in order to close the full vector towards critical assets.
Oh, that's wonderful. What you are telling in nutshell is that the CISO and the security organizations within enterprises need to have a larger, clear picture so that they can pinpoint on the areas which are most concerning and can figure out what needs to be done in terms of applying technology or solutions to those areas. Excellent. So, a while ago, that is what intrigued me to speak to you. A while ago, XM Cyber unveiled its first ever impact report. Now, I would expect you to tell us about the data that this report analyzed, its sample size, methodology, etc., and what were the key insights found in the report.
Sure. So yes, it was our first impact report. We took lots of information comes from our customers. The information includes the different attack techniques that we are seeing, the different trends that we're seeing about what happens if you make a remediation, what is the impact to the organization. And we joined all of them together and we tried to answer the most interesting the most interesting and important key points that will show major issues. So if we take, for example, some of the key things that we found in the impact report, we first saw that 75% of the critical assets in the organization can be compromised. And to me, it was a large number to see when you look at the big picture, because sometimes organizations have hard time even determine what are their critical assets, not even talking about if it can be compromised or not. And when we joined the information together from all of the environments that we see, it was a pretty shocking thing to see. We also could correlate other information that we're able to gather ourselves with other reports that we saw, because we know that credential is one of the most important issues that currently is in the industry. And we actually saw that the most attack technique that we saw in all of the environment was domain credentials that we're able to see that is exposed in all the environment. It is cached on multiple machines. No one can actually know how to manage it, how to reduce the risk when it's possible, and how it's even connected towards other cloud environments. Okay. Sometimes there are SSO features, so by abusing a specific credential, it actually have a bigger effect in the environment.
Okay, and that's very startling fact that 75% of the critical assets are vulnerable and can be compromised, and therefore, this is something which is very revealing, which came out from the report. Now, if you can tell us about some of the biggest challenges and gaps when it comes to safeguarding these critical assets, where do the organizations or the security teams generally fail in knowing what are the critical assets and then safeguarding them?
Yeah, so you actually said it. One of the issues is even just understanding what are critical assets. And with our solution, we actually give labels to different important things that we're seeing in your environment, which actually helps identifying the different critical assets. And the big challenges is that within organizations, different environments work in silos. As I said before, we have the on-prem security team and we have the cloud security team, and usually they're not really talking one to each other. So when we are able to find an issue, it's hard to determine who is responsible for the issue, if we can put any remediation toward it without ruin any day-to-day job that's supposed to happen in the environment. And this is one of the biggest challenges that we saw. We also saw that in order to compromise the critical assets, in average, right? Everything is in average, but 4 ops, which means 4 different attack techniques supposed to happen in order to compromise them. And when we connect together the on-prem and the cloud, those 4 ops are also connected. So some of the ops are relevant for the cloud team, and some of them are relevant for the on-prem team. And then we need to decide with them together what will be the best remediation to put and where in order to remediate the full attack vector towards those critical assets.
So, Joe, when you say that the top attack techniques or the areas that are most concerning are the mismanaged or stolen credentials, I would like to ask, what is lacking in the security infrastructure of the organizations? I mean, why are they not able to cope up with this problem?
Yeah, oh, so that's actually a good question. So I think that when you are starting to be a bigger company, a bigger organization, you're getting more and more employees inside, you're buying more and more systems. Sometimes you acquire companies, so you acquire a full company that you never managed before, and now you join it to your infrastructure altogether. Then you start to lose control. You start to lose control on who is credentialed to which environment, when they can use them. Is there a good tiering system, tiering model in your infrastructure or not? And sometimes this is not the case. And actually having the capability to model all of this together is a huge benefit for organization, because they can see, and in the current state, they just can't see. They can't see that, for example, I have a very strong credentials and I can do whatever I want to your environment. And I'm also spreading those credentials in your environment. So on lots of the machines, those credentials are cached and can be compromised. And this is a big challenge for organization today.
In the report, it was also mentioned that a majority of businesses are open to compromise every time a new remote code execution technique is found. So can you throw a little bit light on that as well?
Yes. So in our on-prem environment, we try to model 3 different categories in the system. One of those categories is vulnerabilities. So whenever a new vulnerability pops out, for example, Log4Shell, I don't know, Petit Potin, which also made some noise, organization, because their environments are big, they are not aware where those vulnerabilities are found, and if those vulnerabilities can actually be exploited. So what we do internally in our research team, we first understand and model those vulnerabilities and add them to the product. So immediately all the customers can actually see on their environment which machines are actually vulnerable and can be exploited by the attacker. And there is also the other issue that depends on your industry, actually, I think. There is a time gap between a vulnerability is being known. There is a valid patch that you can install till the time that you actually install it in all of your environment. And this time gap is the time that the attackers actually are waiting for. And once it's there, they can exploit those vulnerabilities pretty fast before you even were able to patch your environment. And with our product, what we try to do, we try to simulate it as fast as possible. So the organization will be able to know on which machines you need to start to put the patches, because those machines are in the vector to its critical assets. And this is one of the values that customers are actually gaining from the system itself.
Excellent. It's quite a informative conversation that I'm having with you. Moving on to the few last points that I have to discuss. I'm quite keen to understand about the revelation that in less than 4 hops or 4 steps, 94% of critical assets can be compromised from the initial breach point. Now, can you please explain and elaborate how does this work? What is this concept of 4 hops?
Yeah, so if we try, let's try to imagine that we're different dots. And those dots are what we have in our environment. Each dot might represent a machine, it might represent a specific cloud service, a database, a specific user, and so on. Then when we want to choose what is our critical asset, we can actually put a tag on one of those dots and say, this is our critical asset. Yeah. Then if we want to model the vectors towards the critical asset, we can just create some lines between the dots. Yes. Those lines together is what I'm calling a vector. Okay. And when you take the bridge point, which means this is the initial point that the attacker is currently on. It might be a specific machine that has vulnerability and is exposed to the internet. It might be a specific machine of a user that is being a victim to a phishing attack and so on. And in the other side is our critical asset. So what we're able to understand is that within 4 ops, each op is a line between 2 different dots in the graph that we created. So with 4 ops, we can actually start from the bridge points and going over to a critical asset. And 4 ops is pretty fast because, for example, when I compromise the user is 1 op. So this is why this information was such shocking from my perspective, obviously.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I kind of understood, how quick these 4 hops can be crossed and breach can be simulated. So as recent as yesterday, XM Cyber also announced a new security capability for Microsoft's Active Directory. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. So our system before going over with this new feature was actually modeling different things in the environment. It was vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, and user behavior. There are other issues that might be in your Active Directory environment, which are relevant to the specific permission model within Active Directory. There is also lots of misconfiguration, and actually I can call it mess, in different organizations when it comes to the permission model. So what we're doing behind the scene, we're just taking the permission model of the specific Active Directory environment that we saw. We model it together and we created different attack techniques, depends on the different permissions that we're actually seeing there toward our product. The good thing is that, again, we took another type of category of issues in environment and we put it together in our product, which are now connected between your on-prem environment, your Active Directory environment, your cloud environment, all together in one view, we can say.
All right. Lastly, how does XM Cyber suggest to reduce the risk or to disrupt the attack paths? What's your suggestion to the listeners of this show?
So what in general you want to do, you want to understand what you have in your infrastructure, and then you need to define what are critical assets. When you do these 2 things, they are not simple, but once you model them, you can start to understand what you want to secure in your environment, because you know what is the most critical things to you, and you can start to map what are the issues towards those critical assets. So you would like to use an attack path management solution to help you solve those issues. Within our product, we're able to understand what are the choke points in your environment, and we're mapping your choke point as the entities in the vector toward your critical asset, that if you remediate the issues on them, you will gain the most return on investment of remediating them, because you secure the most vectors toward your critical asset.
Okay. While I've exhausted the list of questions, but out of curiosity, I want to ask one last question to you, since you have been working very closely with the industry and the environment. Where do you think this whole momentum is shifting in terms of the new attack vectors that are coming into on the horizon? The kind of ransomware attacks that we are seeing, the kind of credential stuffing attacks that we are witnessing, the intensity of DDoS attacks that has gained the momentum in the recent time. Will it ever stop, or do you think that the defender has to be smarter than the attacker?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the most challenges in this industry, because the attacker only need to have one way to do things, while the defender need to understand thousands of ways that he need to defend. Absolutely. And this is why it's easier for the attackers and harder for the defenders. I think that the challenge that organizations need to do is to just reduce the attack vector. It's called attack vector reduction. in the environment. They want to reduce the risk as much as they can in their environment. So it will be harder for the attackers to do it, and will allow them to at least understand when it goes in, to understand that there is something malicious in their environment, so they can start working in order to solve it. So this is the, when you look up high, you can understand that this is the issue that everyone wants to solve. It's hard. Credentials are going to stay with us for a long time. Everyone needs, at the end of the day, someone needs to be able to connect to all the system in the environment to do his work. So this is why it's so challenging.
No, I do understand that organizations, CISOs, CIOs need to reduce their attack surface, attack vectors, and that's one way of looking at things. However, to contradict this, we are right now working in a perimeterless world where we don't know which all endpoints are connecting to our enterprise. We do not know where the information resides, both structured and unstructured data. And therefore, this whole attack surface is very naturally expanding, isn't it?
It definitely is. We have the shifting to the cloud, that is a process that is ongoing for a few years, and it will continue to be in the next years. And when you are shifting to the cloud, you're starting to use more and more services.
Absolutely.
So each one of them solve one issue, but in the security perspective, it actually opens other issues. You are connected to more things. You are connected to the cloud. You are exposing different things. Sometimes people are not experienced enough to do and manage the stuff that are actually responsible on, because they're not experienced in the environment that are currently working, because the environment is also new. No one it's not very mature like Active Directory environment and so on. So when you add more products to your environment, when you're using more and more third-party vendors to help you solve one issue, you're opening a security vector or a security gap in another issue. So as we go, it will be much and much bigger. And this is why I think that having a system that actually model everything together, all of your environment, your different cloud services, your Office 365, your Azure environment, your GCP environment, your Kubernetes environment, your Active Directory environment together, this is what will help you actually reduce the risk as much as you can.
No, great. I think, and also the fact is that it's a kind of never-ending tussle and war between the defender and the attacker. And God forbid, and I really pray that attackers are not successful in their intent as they want to. Otherwise, there will be a havoc, on the earth. So thank you very much for talking to us, Zur. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much.
Same here. Thank you very much for your time.